We are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Future of Transit Town Hall. Technically part 3, because I know that Supervisor Angry and I did a little mini chat a couple months ago after our first one. But if you're new to this, this is an ongoing series that we have in regards to the future of transit and transportation in Prince William County, especially as we continue to figure out ways to deal with our ongoing traffic congestion issues. I'm Occoquan District Supervisor Kenny Boddye, and I'm here joined by Neabsco District Supervisor Victor Angry. Mr. Angry, take it away, sir.
All right. Hey, thank you there, Kenny, Supervisor Boddye. And good evening, everybody. Supervisor Angry here, Neabsco District. Excited to be once again doing this and talking about the future of transit. It has been a running for office platform discussion. It has been an issue around the county and really around the nation that we really have to deal with transportation and traffic and where we're going with this thing. So this is exciting part 3, we'll call it. And I'm really looking forward to the questions, the conversations, and just really the discussion. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Supervisor Angry, and thank you for your leadership as well, especially when it comes to traffic safety, which I know is an issue that's near and dear to your heart. So today we'll be talking about the results of the DRPT, the Department of Rail and Public Transit Springfield and Quantico study. So we're joined by Jennifer and Tim from that agency. We'll also be talking about our local transportation issues. So we're joined by Rick Canizales and Megan Landis from our local transportation department. And then we have Rebecca Horner to round us out with a discussion about land use and how that interlocks with everything. So I'm going to go ahead and let everyone have introductions. Let's start with you, Jennifer. Take it away.
Hey, thank you so much for including us this evening. I'm Jennifer DeBrule. I'm the Chief of Public Transportation at DRPT. And happy to be here to share the outcomes of our study with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us, and thank you for your work on the study and everything else that you do for transportation. Tim, you're up, sir.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Boddye and Supervisor Angry. Thanks for inviting us. I am the project manager of the study. My title is Northern Virginia Senior Program Manager, Major Capital Investments, and that's a long way of saying that my position is responsible for Metro or WMATA. So it's good to be here. Thank you both for inviting us.
Hey, thank you so much again. So with that, I will then hand it over to Mr. Canizales, who's the head of our transportation department. Go ahead, Rick.
How you doing? My name's Rick Canizales. I'm the Director of Transportation here at Prince William County. Your Director of Transportation, and we'll be talking a little bit about transportation, our projects, what we do, and an update to the mobility plan a little later on tonight. And looking forward to it. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Rick. We appreciate everything that you and your shop do for mobility in our county. Next, we have Megan Landis from our transportation department as well.
Good evening. My name is Megan Landis. I am a research and grant analyst with the Planning and Programming Division of the Transportation Department.
Thank you so much for that, Megan. And for folks that don't know, our transportation department is top rate when it comes to finding grants and other matching fund opportunities for us to extend our tax dollars as far as possible. So the work that Megan does is key to a lot of our transportation goals and vision here in the county. And last but not least, Rebecca Horner. Go for it, Rebecca.
Hi, this is Rebecca Horner, and I am Deputy County Executive with the Community Development Agencies, which includes both transportation and planning, and a few other agencies related to development. I am also, for the time being, acting as planning director while we recruit for a new planning director. And I just want to say thank you to both Supervisor Angry and Supervisor Boddye for being such ardent advocates for smart land use planning and keeping on top of transit and transportation issues relative to land use. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you for your long years of service and all the roles that you take in. One of the biggest jobs that we have as supervisors is where things are being built. And as we talked about before, a key part of that is making sure that we're having very good transit-oriented development. And Rebecca's been a key partner in that discussion. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn it over to both Jennifer and Tim to give a very broad overview of the findings of that DRPT Springfield Quantico study, and then we'll look at some questions that the folks who have pre-registered have given us in regards to that study. So without further ado, Jennifer and Tim, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Jason, if you don't mind pulling up our slides, we will go ahead and get started. Thanks. So really, again, like I said, very pleased to be here this evening and share with you, a brief on the Springfield to Quantico Enhanced Public Transportation Feasibility Study that we are in the process of wrapping up right now. So we can go on to the next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background, in the 2020 session, the Virginia General Assembly did include a budget amendment that directed DRPT to conduct a feasibility study, and that study is scheduled to be complete by December 1st of this year, with a few key objectives. And it really was for us to look at a comprehensive and objective evaluation of a range of different future transit alternatives that could be considered in the corridor between Springfield to Quantico. In doing that, we need to look at costs, benefits, and the impacts of each option to help inform the decision makers about recommendations that they could make in the future for investment in the corridor. Next slide. So in terms of our study area, we are really focused on the area around I-95, Route 1, and the corridors from just west of those corridors to the east. So that's the area where we were looking at, potential transit and public transportation improvements. However, the impacts and how those potential alternatives were analyzed looked at traffic patterns within all of Prince William County and, quite frankly, the whole metropolitan Washington region and beyond. So while our recommendations and our potential transit solutions are focused in this area, we really did look at a broader regional travel movement as part of the study. Next slide. So in terms of our technical approach, we followed what is a fairly typical approach for transit study. We started out looking at what are the needs in the study area, but unlike most transit studies, we did take two parallel paths with this study. We did our traditional transit study where we looked at different types of alternatives and we tested and evaluated those alternatives. But at the same time, we also looked at some different land use scenarios. And whenever you're looking at high capacity transit alternatives, how that transportation interacts with land use and the densities and the types of land use that are in the corridor definitely impact the viability of different transit alternatives. So by looking at some different scenarios in parallel to the transit study, we were able to actually look at several different alternatives at the same time. And so we had both of those sides of the study that fed together to come up with our final study that is getting very close to being published. Next slide. So over the past year and a half, we've gone through a number of public and stakeholder outreach activities. We had a technical advisory committee that met with us on a monthly basis. We had several elected officials briefings to keep the elected officials in the corridor up to date on what was going on with the study. We had a website, fact sheet. We did an online survey that we got a very strong response to. It's over 1,200 responses, which is very good feedback on a study like this. So grateful for everybody that took time to participate in that. We held some pop-up events, and then we had a series of public meetings. We were really hoping that for the last round of public meetings, we'd be able to have those in person, but we ended up having all of the public meetings in a virtual format starting in May, and then we had a meeting over the summer in July and a couple of meetings in September. Next slide, please. So we heard a lot of things about transit needs in the corridor. We heard that enhanced transit is needed because the existing transit doesn't serve all the types of trips and destinations very well. We heard that transit service, additional transit service would be necessary to help support future development. We talked about how transit can improve equity by making vital connections to opportunity. We heard about how important transit connections are to key activity centers like Fort Belvoir and Quantico, where existing services are limited. And as Supervisor Angry and Supervisor Boddye said in the introduction, traffic congestion is already a significant issue in the corridor and is projected to continue to get worse. And finally, we also heard a lot about access to transit service. It really is dependent on having a vehicle, the way it's structured today, or taking long walks to the bus. So that accessibility component is something that we heard as well. Next slide. So as we looked at different options, we used a variety of different goals or metrics to evaluate feasibility. We looked at the potential ridership of different options. We looked at the impact those different alternatives would have on, reducing congestion within the corridor. We looked at equity and the distribution of the benefits of the projects, potential projects. We looked at accessibility and connectivity. We looked at cost, and then again, we looked at how different alternatives would have impact on land use and development in the corridor. Next slide. So we ended up looking at 5 key alternatives in the study. We looked at 2 Metrorail extensions, one of the blue line and one of the yellow line. We looked at a bus rapid transit alternative. We looked at some expansion of VRE service, and I want to pause here to just note that there is a significant amount of committed work already going on with VRE improvements related to the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative and the expansion of the Long Bridge. And because those projects are already committed, they're part of the baseline of the study. So the VRE service improvement alternative that was evaluated for this study is a very small incremental increase over that significant increase that's coming already with Transforming Rail in Virginia. And finally, we also looked at some additional express bus service as an alternative as well. Because the VRE service was fairly incremental and the express bus was fairly incremental, I'm going to focus on the 2 Metrorail options and the bus rapid transit option as we move through the next few slides. Next slide, please. So the graphic on the screen shows you a map that outlines the blue line alternative that we evaluated. And in looking at these next 3 maps, I just want to draw your attention to the circles that are along the line are the analyzed station locations. And you'll see that those circles or those dots are of a different size and are different depth of color. So the larger those circles are and the deeper the color is, the more projected boardings or more projected ridership we're seeing from those specific locations. So for the blue line, you can see in the northern part of the corridor, we see the highest ridership at the existing Franconia Springfield station and Fort Belvoir North. We also see strong ridership at Newington and North Woodbridge. Next slide, please. So this map shows the same, takes the same approach with the yellow line and a potential yellow line extension. For the yellow line, we do see strong boardings at the existing Huntington station at the northern end of the corridor, along with Beacon Hill Road and High Bluff Valley in Fairfax County, and also strong ridership at North Woodbridge and good ridership at Potomac Mills and Potomac Town Center. I will note for both of the Metrorail alternatives, we really saw potential ridership or projected ridership drop off south of Potomac Town Center. Next slide. And so this map shows you what it looks like if we looked at a BRT extension. Fairfax County already has a BRT project in development on the northern end of the corridor. So this looked at applying a BRT approach south of that existing project. And with BRT, the station spacing is there. We have more stations. They're a little closer together. But again, same approach. You see those larger circles and darker circles like up in the on the northern part of the corridor. And then again, in the inset there around Potomac Mills, where we see a pretty good ridership out of that BRT alternative. Next slide, please. So just trying to take a lot of information, and there's a lot more information in the study document itself, and boil it down into a table. We did see definitely some potential in Both of the Metrorail alternatives in terms of ridership and the impact on congestion and increased regional accessibility. We also saw strong ridership potential with the BRT and improved regional accessibility with the BRT extension. All of these are, the evaluation is very relative. Each of these alternatives has strengths and weaknesses. Some of the alternatives do a better job of connecting to jobs. Others do a better job of connecting to residential development and other types of activity centers. So it really is just a tool, and it's a graphic depiction of how these different alternatives definitely weigh out when compared to each other. Next slide. So there are some other considerations for Metrorail extensions. The consideration of an extension all the way down to Triangle or close to Quantico, it would be a very significant extension or in addition to the metro system. It is, from a distance perspective, it is comparable to the extension of the Silver Line to Ashburn. Whenever we have conversations, whenever anybody has conversations about extensions of, Metrorail lines, all of those lines converge in central DC, and that creates congestion on the metro system. And so there are some core capacity needs related to the core of the metro system, and also congestion at the Roslyn Tunnel that will need to be addressed first before any type of extension is really going to be viable. There are also some legal and governance implications around adding Prince William County to the WMATA Compact and the relationships and funding relationships that are associated with that. And then, Metrorail is a lifetime commitment. So there is, beyond just construction of any extension, there are in perpetuity annual capital and operating subsidy contributions that Prince William County would then need to provide to Metro or to the region for the ongoing operation of the entire Metrorail system. There would also be an increase in the funding contribution for Fairfax County as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of the analysis, there were a couple of other things that we wanted to evaluate as we looked at these different alternatives. As I mentioned, when we flipped through the maps, in pretty much across the board, in all the cases with Metrorail and with BRT, we really saw the ridership drop off south of Potomac Mills or Potomac Town Center. And so we did look at, could we make the alternatives more cost efficient by truncating that alignment or making the alignment shorter and ending those extensions earlier. And what we saw with that is that they would be more cost efficient and more cost effective if the alternatives were shorter. We also know that there's a lot of uncertainty in long range planning right now. We've gone through or are continuing to go through the COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen major shifts and changes in how people commute and how people work, and what that is going to look like into the future is still very uncertain. And so we did also do some sensitivity analysis to say, what would happen to a ridership forecast if we saw a percentage of people continue to telework that is higher than it was prior to the pandemic. And that does have an impact on the viability of any kind of large scale transit expansion. We also wanted to look at land use. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we had that parallel process where we were looking at potential land use changes. And so we wanted to see how significant those changes or how significant changes in land use would change ridership forecasts and the viability of the project. And we also learned some land use is a key component of making any of these transit expansions work. So we can go on to the next slide. So in doing that, and I'll just wanted to focus for a minute on land use, as we, as part of the study, we did look at some particular station areas and really took a deeper dive on, what would happen in these areas if there was additional land use density, additional development at those sites. And then how would that impact potential ridership on either a Metrorail extension or BRT project? And we really saw that by shifting that land development, focusing that land development around those station areas, it does make those types of high capacity transit developments much more viable. So we can go on to the next slide. So we can't talk about all of these great transit projects without talking a little bit about cost. These Metrorail, whether it's a Metrorail extension or BRT, they are very capital intensive projects. They are large capital projects that can have a significant cost associated with them. This study is a feasibility study, which means it is a very high level study, a planning level study. While we have a line on a map, it's not an exact alignment. And there are a lot of questions about, that we can't answer based on a study like this. Like, would the alignment be at grade or would it be underground? And what type, how many bridges would be necessary and how much right of way? Those are things that we can't answer at this point in study. So we felt like it was important to provide cost in terms of ranges. And so we do move from, a lower cost alternative by providing additional express bus that really is focused on just buying some additional buses and paying for additional operations, to the much more capital intensive Metrorail extensions, which can be in the neighborhood from about 13 billion to about 27 billion, just in terms of a planning estimate, not to mention those ongoing operations and maintenance costs that would be associated with those projects. So we can go on to the next slide. So just as we wrap up and to kind of put a point on where we are with the study, we really, with this study, it is the first step in the process of moving any of these projects forward for additional study, analysis, or eventually to project development. It really is a study that is intended to show the decision makers in the region the art of the possible. And from here, we are working to wrap up our public comment period and then submit our final report for this study to the General Assembly. That is due by December 1st. All that information is available on our webpage. And then from here, we look forward to continuing the conversation with Prince William County and in the region in terms of what might be considered as a logical next step coming out of this study and moving forward. And with that, we'll be happy to take any questions.
Sure, absolutely. Appreciate that, Jennifer. And before we wanted to move on to questions, Tim, was there anything that you wanted to add to the presentation?
Yeah, I think Jen covered it pretty well. I did notice on the last slide, and I will take the blame for this. The comment period actually does go to tomorrow, which is November 17. I think we said November 16 on the slide. It's actually November 17.
Sure. So people out there watching, they will be taking your comments both tonight and tomorrow. Is that end of business tomorrow, Tim, or is that midnight? What's the deadline on that?
I think we'll take it. We can take it up until midnight. I mean, it's it's an agency email address that it goes to that ultimately gets to me. So yeah, if people are up late at night, before they go to bed, they can send in their comments. We'll take them. Yes.
I mean, with the crowd that we have tonight, I would not be surprised if someone emailed you guys at 11:55 tomorrow night. It just got to me, here's this question about Metro or what have you. So appreciate it. That said, let's move on to questions. Give me 1 second as I shift over to that. So, the big ticket item that a lot of people are really interested in, especially in terms of the DRPT study, is Metro. So a couple of questions here in regards to Metro. And you put, Jen, during your presentation, you had a really good map that showed the distances between stations and whatnot. So the first question that I have here is, it can take nearly 40 minutes to travel to the Blue Line from Springfield to Metro Center. How long do you estimate the ride from Potomac Mills would be from Metro Center?
That's a great question. And, if you look at what's on the system today, Ashburn into Metro Center, once Silver Line Phase 2 opens, that's going to be a ride it's over an hour. Shady Grove up in Maryland to Metro Center, Tim, correct me, I think it's about an hour today. So we are looking at a pretty lengthy metro ride from Prince William County into central DC.
Sure. And as a follow-up to that, did the study identify how how the length of time might impact ridership? Because we know we have a lot of folks that, they jump in their cars, they drive up to DC every day, and that's anywhere between a 45-minute to an hour and a half ride, depending on how the gods of 95 decide the day should go for you. So did the study look at how that length of time might impact ridership?
That's a great question. And that's one of the reasons we use a regional travel demand model that comes out in the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments to do a study like this, because that model allows us, by testing different alternatives, we're going to be looking at things like travel time and congestion and cost of travel, in seeing how those trips kind of assign themselves across the network. So time is definitely a factor in how those trips are assigned in that regional model.
Sure. And to piggyback off of both those questions together, I'm sure a lot of folks are wondering, you addressed it when you talked about it, the core capacity issues with Metro. And if those core capacity issues were taken care of and more trains were added, and the tunnels and some of the bottlenecks were taken care of, could that potentially decrease travel times?
Tim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, the core capacity, the core capacity isn't so much about travel times, but it is about reliability. So, you have right now going on the Blue Line, going through DC between Roslyn and Eastern Market, they're at their limit. They can put 26 trains per hour through that tunnel where the blue, orange, and the silver share. And that's it. They'll never be able to put more trains in there without expanding the tunnels. So the problem that happens is when you have trains running that closely together, there's much more opportunity for delays, for backups. So what you get with the core capacity, and then you also have the issues of people sort of circulating within the system, within the stations. Back before COVID, a station like Metro Center was as full as it was. The escalators were full, so people couldn't get in and out of that station any faster. So the core capacity addresses some of those issues, both getting trains, through Roslyn, through the shared blue, orange, silver segment, and then getting passengers circulating and in and out of the stations faster. So it doesn't necessarily help with like the travel time per se, but it does help with the reliability. It makes it a more reliable trip.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that while we're focused on, a potential expansion in Prince William County, Metro has a study underway, a blue, orange, silver study that's looking at those core capacity issues for the system and also the Roslyn Tunnel.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. And the next one that we have is, and folks that are watching online and YouTube, feel free to add your questions as well. We'll be looking at some of the more open questions later on. But looking at the study results, what do you recommend are as next steps for the county should it wish to pursue an extension of Metro? We're talking about Prince William County, obviously.
Yeah, I think the next good step, and I know this is later on your agenda tonight, but I think the conversation around land use and good land use planning to support transit development is key to how any potential transit, high capacity transit occurs in Prince William County. So I can't underestimate, there's no way to downplay the importance of land use and really, strong conversations about land use going forward to help make this a reality.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. And the last one I have before we move on to Rick and his shop is for you, Jennifer, again, and if you want to chime in as well, Tim, a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is the environment and greenhouse gas emissions. Because as we talk about mass transit, we're getting more people into trains, whether that's bus rapid transit on a bus, or whether it's a BRE train or electric bus, or even a metro train. So how was greenhouse gas emission reduction factored into the study, and was it a factor when you guys were doing the study itself?
Tim, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can answer that. So greenhouse gas per se is something that is it's a derivative of the regional model. When you look at, I think when you saw the measures, congestion mitigation is one of the measures that we use to determine, to stack the modes against each other. And that's how you would see greenhouse gas or emissions reduction reflected. And I think I looked up right before the meeting, the figure was about 100,000 vehicle miles of in congested conditions. The metro alternatives would reduce congestion by about that much. But as far as like an actual number of metric tons in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, that is beyond the scope of the study, and we didn't look at it that way. What we did look at was how much congestion we're reducing, and then you can use that to calculate. You can use that to calculate an emissions reduction.
I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. One, just due to the amount of time that you all had, said you guys did manage to get a lot done in a relatively short period of time, but just the fact that you have a lot less cars idling in traffic all day will definitely reduce those greenhouse gas emissions, no matter which alternative we would take. And that's something I wanted to mention as well. You guys looked at these as alternatives, but it doesn't mean that we only have to choose one. Right, we talk about having the BRT and the bus expansion for the express bus as that first step, because a lot less capital cost, a lot quicker to get spun up to build that capacity, build that ridership to a more BRT. The VRE expansion stuff is happening, as you guys said, anyway. So all this stuff sort of builds on each other. And again, to the point, having more people in mass transit means less people sitting in their cars day in and day out sitting in traffic, which means less greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
That said, go on. Yep.
I was just going to say real quick. I mean, we, for the sake of testing an alternative, put a line on a map.
Mm-hmm.
What those lines look like if and when these projects come to fruition can be completely different. And there are pieces and parts of each one of those alternatives that can be layered on each other. And I think that's part of what lies ahead in terms of the next steps for the county as you look at where you want to go with this. There is no one right solution, and I don't think you should look at each one of those alternatives in a vacuum by itself.
Right. And I appreciate that, because a lot of folks looking at some of these alternatives are thinking, like you said, in a silo, which to us, we're looking at true multimodal solutions. Supervisor Angry, we talk about multimodal solutions all the time. So none of they should be looked at in a vacuum, especially when it comes to having reliability, because there might be one alternative that's good for one day versus another day versus the weekend versus holidays, what have you. So it's an all of the above approach. Thank you so much, folks. And we're going to shift over now to Rick Canizales to talk
Great,
about.
thanks, Supervisor Boddye. Yep.
Thank you. To talk about the local transportation stuff. Rick, you're on.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Boddye, Supervisor Angry. Like I said, I appreciate the invitation to come talk to you today. I think we have a presentation that hopefully Jason can put up here shortly. But I think that your transition is perfect, talking a little bit about multimodalism and how we have to look at the network as a whole to what I'm going to talk about, because today, the way I'm going to talk about this is let everybody know here today what we're doing here in the Department of Transportation and with our transit partners to improve the area, the study area that Mr. Bruhl and Mr. Roseman just discussed, and come up and let the people know that we already are working some multimodal transportation improvements through the area. What you'll see in common about the projects I'll be talking about here shortly is that a lot of these projects, especially the road projects I'll be discussing, all come with both pedestrian and bicycle facilities in the form of a multi-use trail. With that said, if we can go to the first slide, we'll go north to south on the projects that we are doing here. The first project that we're doing is we're widening one between Featherstone and Mary's Way, which is that piece of Route 1 that is in between two pieces that have already been widened. Once we complete this piece, we will have a widened Route 1 between the bridge up in the Occoquan all the way down to the Ferlazzo area at Cardinal and Yabsco Road. Next slide, please. And again, I did want to mention on that past slide that includes a sidewalk on one side and a shared use facility or a shared use trail on the other side. The next project we'd like to talk about and getting to that density that I think that Jennifer was talking about. We're doing this extension to Annapolis Way, which will create an area there with a lot of density that can reach both Route 1 and Route 123. The exciting part about this project is that the second half of this project, the Marina Way extension, is also looking to be funded by VDOT, and we'll hopefully have a decision on that in December to see if we can get that funded as well to get that North Woodbridge plan into effect and make sure that those densities that are needed for transit are able to be handled by the network that exists out there today. Next, and this also has pedestrian and bicycle facilities with it. VDOT is doing an I-95 auxiliary lane between 123 and the Prince William County Parkway on 95. This is a congestion relieving project, but it's also a safety and project to allow for better weave movement through that area. And I think will help that area, the county, a lot through that bottleneck that exists today at the Occoquan. Next slide, please. Summit School Road, this is a county-done project with MVTA funds that is bettering the access to what we call the Horner Road, the old Horner Road, over 2,500 space park and ride lot facility, as well as a Telegraph Road facility with over 750 spaces. This is a big transit hub and the biggest park and ride lot in the state. And we're bettering the access from both sides, from both the Minnieville as well as Prince William County Parkway side. And this project not only goes to the Prince William County Parkway, but also does intersection improvements at Caton Hill. Next slide, please. The Horner Road Park and Ride lot. This is we're doing an increasing capacity and bettering the pedestrian movement through that. Again, looking at multimodal solutions through the area by not only bettering the parking lot and the commuter lot network, but by bettering the transit network within it to be safe and connected to the rest of the system. Next slide, please. If you're not aware, we are doing the county's first public commuter garage over at Potomac Neabsco Mills. This is in front of the Potomac Town Center over off of Opitz Road. It's a design build project, and we're excited to be taking this to the board at the beginning of next year for award and hoping to get this completed by 2024. It is a major project that's being funded by VDOT and our federal partners, and is being done as a design build. It will include pedestrian enhancements to the area, especially in front of the hospital, as well as in front of the town center. And we are doing this project in conjunction and with help with the next project. Next slide, please, which is the Opitz Road ramps that VDOT is doing with Transurban. These ramps will connect from the express lanes to Opitz Road and give another access to Opitz Road to get onto 95. Again, we just had some public hearings on this, but it's a very exciting project that comes along and came along with the commuter parking facility that we just talked about. Next slide, please. We're also doing a widening of Route 1 down in the town of Dumfries. It's a very exciting project. It's about $170 million. It's a combination between Smart Scale and VDOT funding, as well as NVTA, or Northern Virginia Transportation Authority funding. It's going to consist of widening Route 1 to 6 lanes and allowing the town to keep the other side of Route 1 as a 2-lane local road within the town limits. This also will come with pedestrian facilities, both a sidewalk and a shared use path. Very big project, very excited about it. It is gonna affect over 100 properties and will take a while. You see that the project completion, although we've already started design, is not set till 2026. Next slide, please. We're also doing Fuller Heights Road. This is also another federal project in front of the Quantico. I wanted to cover the whole entire study area that took us down to Triangle and Quantico. And this is a project right in front of the Quantico entrance that also allows for better access from Fuller Heights to Triangle Road by putting in a roundabout and also adding a lane to Joplin Road on the west side of Route 1. Next project, next slide, please. VRE is doing Quantico Station improvements. These are due to be done in 2023. This is to better, again, the pedestrian access and not have people go over the tracks. and better the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations to the track. Next, to the station, I'm sorry. Finally, we're getting into some studies now, and some studies that we're doing in the area to enhance some of the studies perhaps that are being done, including the DRPT study. The county has received this study to look at peak hour express bus service through Dale City and that small area plan in that area, and looking to see how we best accommodate express bus service through Dale City and through Dale Boulevard to hook up to the many commuter lots and many pedestrian facilities and bus stations that are available to us through that corridor, and with the six and 4 lane sections of that corridor also being available to perhaps look at bus only or HOV lanes through that corridor during peak hours. Megan is very involved in this study, and she can give you more information if there's some questions asked. Next slide, please. The last study that we're doing right now in this corridor is we're doing it with VDOT. It's called a STAR study. You see what STARS means up there. It's strategically targeted affordable roadway solutions. This is like a pre-scoping study. It looks at concept plans, gives us some estimates, gives us some initial impacts of some of the projects we're looking at. And VDOT is looking, and the county are looking at the 123 corridor, as we're looking at the intersection of 123 and Old Bridge, 123 and 95, and 123 and Route 1. A lot of these projects that you see that are being looked at and examined now already have some money to start the funding of it. As you see, Route 123 and Old Bridge, which is also a 2019 road bond project adopted by the citizens of Prince William County, has some funding on it. 123 and 995 just received $69 million and is recommended for approval of the monies from Transurban in the I-95 Express Lane project. And Route 123 has received some federal funding as well as some CIP funding. And we are looking not only to that, but to also start acquiring properties through the area to make that that solution or that facility a little easier to construct. Next slide, please. With that said, I've talked a little bit about the projects that we're doing and a little bit about the studies that we're looking at for future projects in the corridor. I also wanted to talk a little bit to kind of connect what we discussed in the study, the DRPT study, to what we are doing as a county now. And what we're doing is we're looking and updating our mobility chapter of the comprehensive plan. Now you see it called mobility chapter. We used to call it the transportation chapter or the thoroughfare plan when we used to talk about the roads. But now we're going into a multimodal system where we're looking at mobility as a multimodal network of getting people and goods around. So the mobility chapter is an integrated, or it will be once we get the update completed, an integrated plan of all transportation facilities and all transportation policies and goals. What we're looking to do, obviously you see up there on the screen, is update that vision. I think the vision needs some changing to make sure that as we're integrating, we're looking at everything we need to look at and looking at it multimodally. We're examining these multimodal concepts and looking at how the future land use decisions that Ms. Horner will be talking about after me kind of work with the plan, or how we make it work with the plan. We're going to review our policy goals and objectives for all sectors and all modes of transportation. We're looking for community outreach, resident and stakeholders. We have been going out to meetings. We have been talking to the Planning Commission about this as we're going through this update. We're going to evaluate level of service. We're going to discuss it with our partners, and DRPT is obviously one of our partners, as well as OmniRide and VRE, our other transit partners in the county that run our buses and our trains that exist today. And then again, we're going to do recommendation of multimodal facilities, and this is where it kind of all ties in together. These recommendations that we're going to make are the facilities, are the transportation facilities that we think we need to the year 2040. So we're looking at 20 years ahead and what we can get in there. And some of the recommendations that DRPT is making today, we may be seeing be included in the update to our plan. With that said, obviously the comprehensive plan includes both mobility and land use, and that's what we're going to give to the board to vote on in 2022. And as that plan goes on, that's what's going to feed into our capital improvement program, where our projects that get some funding actually get included and are in this 5-year program to start doing the project. Next slide, please. The mobility plan update a little more. We just wanted to include some sample goals for mobility. Some of the things that we as staff have brought forth to the Planning Commission as well as to the public that we are looking at. And you see there emerging and future mobility trends and looking at some example goals there and making sure that, again, we cover all the trends that are happening, not just transit, biking and pedestrian and road, but also looking at autonomous vehicles, autonomous buses, making sure we have facilities for electric vehicles and charging stations, those kinds of things, and those emerging issues that come up with emerging technologies. We want to look at transportation sustainability and resiliency to make sure that we're reducing that environmental impact. It's something that Supervisor Boddye brought up and is very important and dear to our hearts, as well as we look at how the transportation facilities deal with the environment and what we have to do to mitigate those impacts, as well as looking at equity and access in transportation, something that we haven't looked at before, but making sure that we eliminate those disparities and that we free ourselves of barriers that are created, whether through freeways, highways, roads, whatever it is, and be able to make the county more accessible to all its residents. Next slide, please. Finally, the last slide I want to talk about is what we currently have. What we currently have is, as part of our transit plan, is an existing transit improvement plan, which looks at the transit improvements that we're looking to have within the 20-year timeframe of our last comprehensive plan. But then we also created, and to the right, you see a future transit alternatives map. And what we did there is we were looking at facilities that may not come into play in 20 years, or we may not be able to have in 20 years, that we wanted to continue to examine, look at, implement, if possible. And as you see there, the extension of the blue line is already included in this map, as well as the extension of the orange line. We do not have the yellow line on there. We do have BRT, but we do not identify the difference between BRT and express bus. So that's something we're going to need to look at. As the DRPT study has shown us, we have a menu of alternatives, and along with the supervisors, the public, the stakeholders, the planning commissioners, we'll be looking at those recommendations and be seeing where they belong, in which plan, and in what part of our implementation process and what part of our planning process these improvements can be included. With that said, I think a lot of this has to do a lot with densities, like it was brought up earlier. I think the eastern side of Prince William County is ready for additional transit, and those densities are starting to come as these developments that Ms. Horner will talk about soon, and these small area plans start coming to fruition. And I think that it's important that we just make sure that our transportation plan and our transportation efforts keep in tune with those land use decisions that are being made. With that, I thank you very much again, Supervisor Boddye, Supervisor Angry, and I leave it to any questions or transition over to Ms. Horner's transportation on land use.
Sure, no, absolutely. Thank you for that very quick but very comprehensive view of all the transportation projects going on and how it really links up with what the DRPT folks were looking at. And I also definitely appreciate looking at and highlighting that 123 corridor. As you know, a lot that corridor is one of the most talked about in the entire region, if not the entire country at times. And a lot of my constituents really care about that. But without further ado, I will turn it over to Rebecca, as she has one of the most important parts of this, how the land use connects to these transportation considerations. Rebecca, you're up.
Thank you. I've got a presentation here. So I am very excited to be in Prince William County. And I just say it is a really exciting time to be in Prince William County right now. And I feel lucky and blessed to be able to be part of it, because Prince William County is going through transformational change, and there are opportunities facing Prince William that had not before. When I came to Prince William 8 years ago, people would laugh when we talked about metro extension and laughed about a lot of different types of transit modes because we weren't quite yet at the point in which we were at the cusp of reaching some of these triggers that would allow us to have this extension. So I have on my first slide here a picture of the front of our comprehensive plan, because one of the reasons it's exciting to be in Prince William County right now is we are updating our comprehensive plan. We do this about once every 10 years. We look at a really comprehensive change to our comprehensive plan. So we look at the next 20 years, and we're calling it the pathway to 2040 because we're planning for the next 20 years to 2040. Next slide. So this process has been a long one, partially because of COVID, partially because we've got some new board members who are challenging us to look at things in a more comprehensive way than was initiated in 2016. So in 2016, the Board of County Supervisors initiated this update. It wasn't an initiation into every chapter of the comprehensive plan, but many of the chapters of the comprehensive plan. One of the primary things that we did was in 2017, after it was initiated, the board adopted the population projections to 2040. That means that we have included in our plan the expectation that the populations are going to grow by 100,000 people in the next 20 years, take us to about 570,000 people. So that's a significant amount of growth. We are the second largest jurisdiction in Virginia and one of the fastest growing. I think COVID has really only accelerated the interest in people's interest in Prince William County, as some people want to leave the urban core. We don't believe that's going to change our population projections, but it might change the pace in which people move to Prince William County in the next few years. But right now, we don't expect that population projection at 2040 to change. But since the board adopted this in 2017, the question for us now, as we get near the end of the comprehensive plan update with the land use chapter and the mobility chapter, is where should these new dwelling units, these new people live in the county? Where do we want to direct new growth? And what should that growth look like? And we want to consider affordability and accessibility, and also consider our energy and climate goals and targets that the board has endorsed from the Washington Metro Council of Governments. Next slide. So one thing that's really important to note is that in our current comprehensive plan right now, and in what we have available in our residential build out, so this is dwelling units that are entitled, they've gone through a rezoning or a special use permit process, but maybe haven't been built yet. We call that our residential inventory. And then we also look to see what our comprehensive plan can accommodate if additional land is rezoned or special use permit obtained for additional dwelling units. So what we know is that in our current residential inventory, we only have about 7,700 dwelling units in our residential inventory of what we would consider actively developing projects. There's another about 3,000 that are not actively developing or in areas where we don't believe that those units can be built because of the configuration that was that the builder did at the time that they site planned the area. So we believe that we really have about 7,700 dwelling units right now that could be built upon. And generally speaking, we've been absorbing or building about 1,500 or maybe slightly 1,500 to 1,700 a year. So that means our current residential inventory can only accommodate a little over 4 years. That's a very, very low residential inventory. When I got here 8 years ago to Prince William County, we had about a 13-year to 15-year residential inventory. So we have really dwindled that number. Now, when you look at the capacity in terms of planning, maybe not zoned, we have about 35,000 units total that we can accommodate, 23,000 of which would need some kind of a rezoning or entitlement. And that's largely due to what the board has done in the last few months, last couple of years to a few months, in adopting some of our small area plans. So we used to have many less than this. I think the small area plans have probably brought in about 17 to 20,000 additional units. So we were very underplanned and underzoned for what our population projections are. So we need to address the additional units in our land use plan. Next slide. So as we're doing that, we have a few different policies in our comprehensive plan, hundreds. I'm kind of there's a lot of policies in our comprehensive plan. But one that we like to anchor back to frequently is our 10 principles of smart growth. And I highlighted a couple that are relevant for our discussion tonight. So these guide how we try to grow in the future, and creating walkable neighborhoods, strengthening and directing development towards existing communities and infrastructure, and providing a variety of transportation choices are all very important to us, because we want to make sure that people have access and that we're not creating additional congestion and traffic, that we're using our resources that we have efficiently. We're identifying where future resources are planned and utilizing and leveraging those resources. Next slide. And we also anchor back to, these are DRPT standards, multimodal system planning. And as we have begun this process of the comprehensive plan update in 2016, for the first time in the comprehensive plan, we've been integrating multimodal system planning and mixed use planning to a greater extent than we ever have in the past. Next slide. And one way that we're doing that is we're really focusing new growth in the future, that 100,000 people that we need to accommodate. We want to focus those in our local activity centers and redevelopment corridors, which are identified here. They're including what we identify as regional activity centers or local activity centers, our sector plans, and then our small area plans are identified in here, and then redevelopment corridors. These are all opportunities for us because they either have existing or planned transit. There are a couple that are further out, like Nokesville, that really don't have a lot of access right now. And so that's something that we need to take into consideration when we look at how much growth we want to place in different areas. So we have a lot of opportunities here in terms of our activity areas and future and planned transit to make sure that we're leveraging those resources and being smart about how we're planning for growth in the future. And Jennifer, in the beginning of her conversation, talked about making sure that we have future growth in the right areas. And we call that transit supported density. So when we think about future transit expansion, and she had a cost benefit analysis that they have in their study findings, that cost benefit greatly increases when we know ridership increases. Well, we need, in order to get ridership to increase, we need to make sure that we're building future density, future dwelling units in those areas. And when you go back to our principles of smart growth, we're talking about walkable neighborhoods. So we're talking about compact, walkable development that has good access to transit and future transit, because those densities around those areas, those hubs, will raise the cost benefit analysis to a point in which we can start to invest, and the federal government, the state government, and local governments can start to be efficient about how we're investing our future money, so we're getting the best bang for our buck. Next slide. We also want to consider affordability, because this is important. Affordability is very important to Prince William County. We have always been an affordable alternative to the DC metropolitan area. Our housing, the housing boom or housing shortage really right now that we're experiencing has raised housing costs and reduced affordability. We're hearing of rental rates that are north of $2,000 a month when we've never seen rates like that before. So it's becoming an increasingly concerning issue in Prince William County. And transportation and the cost of transportation is a huge part of a household's cost burden. So I just wanted to recognize that connection is important, and we want to make sure that we're providing housing opportunities near transit, not only to get a good leverage for the resources that we have and future resources that are planned, but also for affordability, so that our residents can still live here and still work here and have access to their employment or places they would like to go. Next slide. One of the ways we're doing that with our comprehensive plan update is by adding new land use classifications, long range land use classifications, that greater mix of uses to help support transit supported density in the future. So we'll continue to be addressing these as we move forward. And when we receive information DRE released a study in 2016 related to the Innovation Gainesville and Haymarket extension of the DRE, which provided us a lot of feedback about the lack of transit supported density in that corridor. We then went and performed a study that identified corridors that we can strategically increase density in that corridor to provide for a better cost benefit analysis in the future by increasing future ridership, which we are using for our comprehensive plan update. And likewise, the DRPT study findings, especially along the Route 1 corridor, when you get south of Potomac Mills and Potomac Town Center. This is valuable feedback for us as we look at these updates to our comprehensive plan so that we can ensure that we are planning for future extension when it's the right time. Next slide. And then the last thing I'll say is this is a link to our comprehensive plan update, Pathway to 2040. Our project lead is our long range planning manager, David McGettigan, and that's his email. And then if you're not already connected with our PWC alerts, you can connect here and you will receive alerts every time we have events or update a web page related to our comprehensive plan update, because we definitely want to hear from you. We want to get engaged in the process as we finalize. We hopefully will be releasing recommendations and draft recommendations for public comment by the end of this year. So it's an exciting time to be in Prince William County, but right now is really the time that we need to get engaged and participate in this process so that we can make sure we are being very smart about the way that we plan for our community in the future. Thank you.
So thank you so much for that, Rebecca. One of the reasons why I wanted to sort of have us end with that is, a lot of folks tend to ask us, why is this so important? And why does it matter that we address these issues now? Obviously, no one likes sitting in traffic, so looking at transit holistically already makes sense. But as Rebecca outlined at the beginning of her presentation, people are going to be coming and continuing to move to Prince William County. There's no way we can really stop that. And we have to learn how to properly accommodate that. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in the constant cycle of being congested and having these issues, having these same conversations again and again every 10 years. So as folks saw, we're going to grow by 100,000 people over the next 20 years. And we have to make those decisions that create that vision now in order to accommodate that. The last thing I want to touch on before I turn it over to Supervisor Angry to ask some of the questions of folks that we have prearranged is, along with the land use and the mobility chapter that both Rebecca and Rick talked about, is the housing chapter. And the housing chapter is another way in which we're looking at that accessibility and affordability of folks being able to live where they work and also have access to these transit options in an equitable way. So I'm done talking for a while. I'm going to let Supervisor Angry take it over from here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Supervisor Boddye. These are hard to do because, as you and I know, Kenny, last time we did both of these, we had to extend it because they go so long and there's so much information. I have literally 1,000 questions and comments to make myself, but in the interest of the people and us putting this together, I'm going to, abstain from making any comments and just get to the question so we can have a holistic discussion. I will say this, I've been reading the comments on YouTube, and so thank you to everybody who's on, because I know this is important for all of you, and you are constantly asking questions, and they're all there. I have some that came in earlier, so I'm gonna read those off to our panelists just to answer, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Kenny, to continue on, so we can really try to get our bang for the buck on this. Bang for the buck, and we can keep it moving. So really, I'm just going to jump right into it. This question is for you, Jennifer. How were the pandemic-related increase in teleworking and changes to commuting patterns factored into the study?
That's a great question. One of the things that we did in our, our scenario planning at the end of the study was we looked at what would happen if a number of the folks that typically commuted in the corridor didn't return to normal working hours in the office. And it does have an impact on the viability of these large scale transit projects. I think that's something that remains to be seen what will pan out over the next couple of years, but it definitely does have an impact on what would be projected ridership in the corridor.
Yeah, again, I want to chime in with you and say more, but I'm going to stop. I'm going to read the questions and then we'll go so we can maybe have some time at the end and maybe Kenny and I can make a few closing comments. So thank you for that, Jennifer. And so this next question is kind of a combination, Jennifer and you, Rick, either or both. Will VRE service be expanded to include more trains? And a follow-up in that, what obstacles to this did the study find, rail yard capacity, Long Bridge, et cetera, and how could they be addressed?
So I think the short answer to that question is all of those things are being addressed through the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative. That was a $3.7 billion agreement with CSX that was announced in December of 2019. That includes the replacement of the Long Bridge and significant increases in capacity on VRE. Because that's already committed, that was all part of the baseline of the study. So our work in this particular study doesn't change any of that. It's going to happen anyway.
Okay.
So
All
good things
And
coming.
as you know, not only the increase of trains, but also an additional station is hopefully coming along here shortly. In the next two, we're hoping that the Potomac Shore Station comes online and starts being able to serve those residents and the residents around in that area as well.
All right. Thank you. And then next, this one here, maybe we'll answer, but Rick, is kind of you and the supervisor, Kenny and myself. Does the county have plans to investing in local bus service and sidewalks, bikes, routes as cost-effective, low-hanging fruit until we have sufficient density to justify more investment in transit infrastructure? Oh, you're on mute. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I'll address the quick funding piece on that one. And then I'll let you address about the policy and how you want to go. Obviously, OmniRide is our bus provider, and we do have a lot of extensive bus service that exists already in the county, especially in the east end of the county. As additional services get identified, we continue to work with OmniRide to identify those additional routes or the additional buses necessary to fulfill demand. What I would tell you is that we work with OmniRide very closely. We just had a discussion with them about future funding of their bus replacement program, as well as their bus shelter replacement program through some federal grants that we receive. So we're very engaged with OmniRide and seeing how we continue to fund additional bus service and additional transit improvements in the area.
Yeah, and I'll just say this here, and Kenny, I don't know if you want to jump in, but I'll just say real quick to that is that prior to COVID, we had a lot of plans moving forward, going with our bus system. But I won't even give a COVID response. One of the major issues now is that ridership really has lowered itself, and it's really a result of COVID. But now it's a matter of how do we get people back to the bus. So even if we improve the routes and we add more, we do the things that we always intended to do, the big question now becomes, where are we in this post-COVID world as far as working from home and the whole transit option? And then so how does that look? So it really has engaged us in a new discussion to try to figure out where we are now and the future going forward. Supervisor Boddye, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, just very quickly, since I've talked a lot already. I agree with that 100%. What I would also say is the buses have started to come back a lot faster than BRE. Both Supervisor Angry and I sit on the PRTC board. So we get briefings, honestly, every month about the ridership levels post-COVID. So these are all important issues to discuss, but we've also talked about thinking outside the box. Our very most recent PRTC meeting, we talked about first mile, last mile travel in a part of the mid-county part of the county, getting, transit on demand, basically where someone's able to go into an app, have a shuttle come pick them up, have them go to their predetermined place within a certain range. So even as we talked about, what the future of transit looks like in a post-COVID world, we're all looking at ways of thinking outside the box, where we're still providing equitable transit opportunities, but knowing that ridership, when you have full buses and full trains, is still going to be a ways off from where we are right now.
Yes. All right. Thank you. I tell you, you and I could do this all night and just go in on a conversation. Maybe we'll have a like a coffee thing where we're just sitting down and having a conversation with no question, just kind of answering all the stuff that we already know is really here. But getting back to those questions, I'm gonna get through mine, let you get yours, and then we're gonna move on. All right, so what does the board see as the balance between increasing mobility for local trips to get residents local jobs and investing in long distance commuting, which in part encourages commercial development in other jurisdictions? Supervisor Boddye, that's a question for us. I'm gonna let you jump on it first and I'll follow with you.
Sure. So I get where the sentiment of that question, right? We currently right now, especially for counties like Stafford and Fauquier and Culpeper, Fredericksburg, we're a pass-through. You know, people jump on the bus, they jump on the train to travel through Prince William, or sometimes they commute up to Prince William to jump on a train, jump on a bus to get to the Beltway. I get it. But what I would push back a little bit on that is we see where metro stops go in, cranes go up. Where new infrastructure comes in for trains and buses, we see more investment from the private sector and more jobs come. I cannot tell you how many times we talked to Christina Wynn over in our economic development department, and she tells you, people will say, oh, hey, Prince William, we're interested in you. Do you have a metro stop? Nope. Sorry, too bad, so sad. We'll go to Fairfax or Loudoun or somewhere else that has a metro stop. So I get that people don't necessarily want to subsidize other folks commuting through us, but we will only see that large scale investment from jobs and from more employment centers when we get those better transit options to Prince William County.
Yeah, and I'll just simply add this. You're exactly right, because I used to commute into the city using the bus or the metro, and I would have to drive to Springfield, park in the garage, and then jump on the metro to go in. So yeah, those are just a lot. We can connect better, and so that opportunity is presenting itself. All right, so I'm going to switch over because we got some live chats, and I want to thank Kenny. I want to thank your staff, really, and my staff for kind of putting this together, because they're kind of in the background, following us on what's going on. So I'm going to go to some live questions that they've put here. When will the commuter buses return to normal schedule? Is there any chance of the Lake Ridge commuter bus returning to its original start location of Dillingham Square? Now, I had an answer that our executive director Bob Snyder prepared, and then Supervisor Boddye, I'm gonna let you talk a little bit more, but I'll read out his answer. Commuter schedules will resume to normal based on ridership volumes. As for Dillingham Square, OmniRide will continue to operate the current routing due to the historically low ridership of the route and the available parking at Corner Road. I think that West End facility really helped a lot with that. I mean, and it's kind of maybe the what do you call them, unintended consequences, but I'll let you address that. So
absolutely. Thank you for that, Supervisor Angry. And yes, Dr. Schneider's answer to that is right on. Right now we're in this sort of state of flux, right, where we have some ridership returning, other routes that used to be very hot and popular aren't as much, but we have some routes that have become even more popular than they were pre-pandemic. So it's all about that balance point of, as we see ridership begin to pick back up on our more existing routes, where are those folks coming from, right? And so we continue as PRTC reaching out to our ridership all the time. Hey, where did you come from? We used to have this route. Do we need to bring this route back? What have you? So that's an iterative process. I actually asked Dr. Snyder about that exact route a couple of weeks ago when I had my meeting with him. And he says, as soon as we get more folks going back to work, especially when DOD and the federal government gives the okay for people to start to work more than just 1 or 2 days a week up in the Beltway, we'll start to see that come back. The last thing I'll add to that is children getting vaccinated. Our health district talked about that one of the biggest sources of the coronavirus right now, even if people aren't necessarily getting sick themselves, are our 5 to 11-year-olds. Now that they're getting vaccinated, we'll start to see it turn with some of these infection rates, and we'll probably start to see turns in terms of people saying, green light, come back to the office, and we'll start to see those routes get back up and running.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I'm going to go one more here, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, because it's a list and it's a lot, and I want you to engage with your list, and then we'll come back around. Would the county consider applying to MBTA or other funding sources for standalone pedestrian and bicycle projects to create new access? Who wants to jump on that? I mean, if it's a yes or no, I'm going to tell you the answer is a definite yes, right? So maybe further. All right, Rick, I see you there.
Yeah, I mentioned this throughout my whole presentation. We continue to look for opportunities, not only to look for how do we connect and how do we do this access, but where there's gaps, where's there existing corridors that we know are being used. We follow GOAT trails, to be honest with you. A lot of people, as we look at some pedestrian facilities, and you have one of those, Gemini Way, where we got to doing that project is seeing that people had created basically their own dirt path up there. So we continue to try to find out our mobility plan that we're updating will look at trails, and not only look at trails from the perspective of transportation trails like we looked at them before, where they were just the ones along the road, but our plan is going to connect those trails to the recreational trails, to the trails that are off the right of way, and make sure we even identify some of those gaps that are included in there of getting people around the county, not just through the road pedestrian system, but through the recreational system combined.
Yeah, so I'll add to that and just simply say this. You know, new development is great because we're in a time now where we understand traffic patterns have changed. We understand what a traffic calming measure is. It's a new improvement. We understand how sidewalk should be built today. Older developments are exactly what Rick is talking about, where we have to always be on a continuous evolution of upgrades or enhancements, if you will, and what's the next thing. And that's kind of where we are.
Retrofitting, which is hard sometimes.
Retrofitting, great word. I love it, because that's exactly what we did at Gemini Way. And I love your analogy about created sidewalks, because you can watch the patterns of where people are walking and recognize this is where the new direction is, and this is what you got to connect to. And we have a lot of sidewalks, and I'm just using the Occoquan District as an example. We have a lot of sidewalks that go nowhere. They dead end, right? And then we have to finish those out. And we have, you know, roads that need completions, and it's always an ongoing, continuing evolution of process. But I'm very happy and thankful, and I think Rebecca said it best about where we are today in this with the current board and the current Prince William and the development that we're doing to, you know, get us to the next level and try to get ahead of this. So I'm really happy that we're really involved in that. Supervisor Boddye.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's much harder, like Rick said, to retrofit what already exists. And, you know, people talk a lot about redevelopment of existing areas. And, you know, during the map that Jennifer put up, and then also Rebecca put up, we talk about these redevelopment corridors. And I know that both you and I, Supervisor Angry, have some really older neighborhoods that were one of the very first neighborhoods in Prince William County. And now how do we go back and make sure that we're bringing those neighborhoods back up to snuff without gentrifying, without forcing those people out of their homes? Because I know that's near and dear to our hearts as well. But we have to find a way to that balance point. So absolutely, you know, we have to continue to go back and forth of how we do these new things and accommodate the new people coming in, while also looking after our own that are already here. Yes. So were you done with your section, Supervisor?
I am, because while I have a few, I mean, I got really a lot more questions, right. But I don't, you know, in the interest of, you know, time and you having your portion of this, I don't, you know, I'm going to apologize to our viewers, but we're going to try to get you, we're going to get you answers to the rest of these questions in a different format. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely appreciate that, Supervisor Angry. So a few final questions on our end for Metro that I know came in through the chat while we were having some folks talk through some other issues. If Jennifer, you're still here, do potential Metro ridership projections have future improvements to accessibility in mind? And the follow-up to this is, what is being done to plan for robust bike and pedestrian networks now that could increase future ridership and reduce need for expensive parking spaces at transit stations?
So I will touch on the first part of that. I mean, in terms of just in terms of accessibility of stations and any type of potential improvements that would be carried forward out of this study, I mean, that would the expectation would be any type of improvements would be fully accessible. That is a baseline expectation. In terms of pedestrian access, I would defer to Rick because that's more of a broader transportation question.
And I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of that question so I can?
Sure, absolutely. So what is being done to plan for more robust bike and pedestrian networks now that could increase future ridership and reduce the need for expensive parking spaces at transit stations, and also accessibility, right? So we talk about pedestrian bike that gets you to the metro station once it comes up and running.
I think we're looking a lot into that, especially in the east end of the county. Our Route 1 corridor projects that you saw that are extensive miles of road enhancement also come with enhancements to the pedestrian and the transit facilities through that corridor. New pedestrian trails, new sidewalk, new bus stops, as well as bus shelters with amenities. Those kinds of things come along with that. The other thing I would have to say or add to that is that we make sure that we take advantage of any grant system that allows us to look into funding pedestrian. Those are very limited. A lot of the grants that are out there are for major road improvements, regional projects, that kind of thing. And it's very limited the amount of money that is out there to do actual pedestrian safety, bicycle connectivity projects. But we take all the opportunities we can, including our federal opportunities with TAP, with Safe Routes to School, with CMAC, all those kinds of funds to make sure that we can build upon our local network as well as our regional network in pedestrian and bicycle facilities.
Absolutely appreciate that, both of you. Next one, we're going back to costs for both Tim and Jennifer here. Of the cost to extend Metro to Prince William County, what would Prince William County's share be?
So in terms of capital, I think, and Tim, feel free to jump in terms of capital, I think that it depends. Any type of large scale infrastructure project like this is going to have a complex combination of funding sources to make it a viable project. And so one component of that would be local funds from Prince William County. I think the bigger question and the ongoing commitment that Prince William County needs to consider is that ongoing commitment for operations, maintenance, and ongoing capital subsidies that would be required beyond just the capital cost of construction. And Tim, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is, it's determined by a formula. So you look at how many stations exist. There's something called the max fare, which is the fare from the end of the line, the percentage of the riders that are paying that, population density. And I don't want to put a number because it's in the final report, but the amount was about similar to what the city of Alexandria pays, more than what Loudoun County would pay. And it was about 5% of the total subsidy. I think the total subsidy right now between DC, Washington DC, Virginia, and Maryland is about $1 billion, and Virginia's share of that is about like 285 million. So it'd be roughly like 5% of that total subsidy, or equivalent to what city of Alexandria is paying.
Appreciate that. That's helpful, and that doesn't get into the fact that there's a lot of folks on the state and federal level which are really interested in this part. I see that Rick jumped on for a second, so I don't know if he had any thing that he wanted to add to that. But we have state and federal partners that would definitely probably try to help us with some of those costs. And when it comes to the Metro Compact and stuff like that, that was said, that we worked out through a formula and some other considerations with our regional partners. Rick, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to mention and make sure that there's some scalability in what Jennifer and Tim are talking about. Right now, our transportation program, which is mostly grant and paid for by other agencies, not locally funded, probably runs somewhere between $100 to $200 million a year. And that's what we spend on doing the 50 some projects or more plus that we have going on around the county to subsidize Metro and to make sure that we cover our maintenance and what we have to give would probably run about 50% of that budget, if not more, at the end of the day. So I just want to make sure that the public has some understanding that the commitment is large, not just with the capital costs that would probably have to be taking some debt under and have to have that debt service, but also again the continual maintenance of the system.
And if I could just jump on to that for a second, I mean, when you look at the capital, that upfront capital cost of construction, from the federal perspective, the most that you see them contribute to that is about 50%. And then when you look at the size of the capital, DRPT's capital program is about $50 million a year. So we don't typically, out of our regular capital program, we just don't have the capacity to advance real big projects like this. So it would have to go through the smart scale on the state side, smart scale process, and compete against your highway projects. So it is a complicated, it's a complicated financial picture, at least on the capital side, to lay out those pieces. Fairfax County is walking through that right now with the Richmond Highway BRT project. So that's a good example of how those types of projects do come together with those funding coming from a variety of sources.
Yeah, I appreciate that. As the chart that you put up earlier on in your presentation, Jen, was important because it shows that there's pros and cons to all these alternatives, and we have to talk about again the fact that these alternatives should not be looked at as in a vacuum, right? The capital costs for a metro extension, whether it's the blue or the yellow line, are by far the heaviest lifts in terms of capital costs and ongoing costs. But they also have the most ridership and congestion relief and all those other factors too. But that doesn't mean that other improvements that we make along the way can't reduce that cost over time that we make to infrastructure improvements and other things. So again, just want to make sure that everyone on watching with us tonight understands that we all understand there's a major cost associated with Metro and BRT and some of these, even these larger rail extensions and what have you, but we're all trying to figure out what the best ramp forward for that is as we continue to need to increase capacity for our commuters. I know we're coming off on time, so I wanted to give all of our panelists a couple, maybe 20, 30 seconds each before we come back to myself and Victor Angry for final thoughts. Let's start in reverse order. Rebecca, did you have any thoughts for the folks as we wrap up here?
No, just please get involved in the comprehensive plan update. We're, like we said, the mobility plan update and the comprehensive plan land use chapter update are being brought forward together. We want to engage as many people as possible. So if you haven't already been involved, please check that website link that I gave you and participate in any community engagement opportunities that we have in the future.
Appreciate that, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Rick and Megan, anything on your end?
I would just ditto what Rebecca says. I think it's a great time to get involved. You're determining what the future transportation facilities and land use are for the county. If you are interested in having Metro come to the county or BRT come to the county, this is the time to voice it and say, this is why we need it. We need this. We need to move forward with these kind of projects to be able to make sure that we include it in our planning process, in our plans to be able to move forward closer to implementation. Thank you again for the invitation to be here.
Absolutely. Megan, did you have anything you wanted to add before we turn it over to Tim and Jennifer?
Thank you, Supervisor Boddye. I just want to highlight and commend the immense amount of collaboration that took place between the county and DRPT throughout this entire study. Members of Transportation Department were on the Technical Advisory Committee throughout the study. And of course, our planning office was very heavily involved. So it's really no coincidence that where you're seeing these Metro stops is where the county has put so much effort into these small area plans. So just thank you to DRPT for all the collaboration, and we look forward to continue to work with you.
Tim and Jennifer, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with what Megan said, and I really appreciate the wonderful partnership that we've had with Prince William County on this, not only on this study, but also in serving on the OmniRide board with you both, and just having the opportunity to continue the conversation about how to advance transit as a method to reduce congestion and better serve our community. So thank you so much for including us this evening and for being great partners and leaders in advancing this study.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Thank you, Supervisor Boddye, and Supervisor Angry. You guys have been really good about, promoting the study, promoting the issue. And I will take 1 second to just ask people to go to the project website, drpt.virginia.gov, Springfield to Quantico. And then you can submit a comment through that website. And we would love for you to go submit a comment on the study, review all the presentations that are there, the executive summary that's there, and then the final report will get posted when it's ready. So yeah, we would love to hear your comments. You have until through the end of the day tomorrow to submit them. So thank you, everyone.
Appreciate that. And Supervisor Angry, I'm going to let you have the last word. So I will just say thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
I'm
We have
sorry.
one more. Go for it,
Sir,
Supervisor Angry. Go
So
for
listen,
it.
I think you should have the last words because I really do. And here's why, because you really brought us here on this. Okay. You know, I have a passion for public safety, and a lot of that right now is dealing with transportation. But I want to say you really brought us here. Okay. And you continue to connect the dots and build the bridges and build the relationships. And so I want you to close it out. So if I could just kind of, is that okay? Okay. Okay. Listen, I want to first there's 3 thank yous I need. The first thank you is to Tim, it's to Jennifer, it's to Megan, it's to Rick, and it's to Rebecca for taking the time to be on this call, because you guys are our subject matter experts. So SMEs, we call them in the military, and you are the ones behind, if you will, enemy lines, I'll just say, because there's a lot that happens with what you do that you have to holistically look at all of this county and really Northern Virginia and the region and where we're going, because this thing is happening. Life goes on and evolution happens and the world changes, and we have to balance that change. And so I thank you all for being the people who want to be in these positions to outwardly think about how we're going to deal with this. So thank you. Second thank you goes to your staff, Kenny Boddye, and my staff for really behind the scenes working the magic of putting this all together and really keeping us on track of the questions and following live chats, which is my third thank you to all of the folks, because I've been following these live chats on YouTube and they're engaged. And so this is a very serious, heartfelt, and delicate subject as we move forward. And I'm going to start there with moving forward. We are moving forward. And I want to thank Rebecca for her comments when she said a transformational change to this county. And we're living in it right now, even through a pandemic. And I always say this, we only have one shot at getting this right. So I want to hear from those who are worried about this change and those who want to see the change, and those who are offering up ideas and options, such as all this chat that I'm watching, ideas of how we get there or what we need to be looking into, and the touch points of the seriousness of this. So I thank everyone for being there. And there is another comment. Where are they coming from? Meaning the people, right? And so as we look at transportation, I want to say there was a comment that came in the question about, it was a question that came in the comment box here about, are we upgrading these roads just for people traveling through them? And the perception of that, and we have to address that. Perceptions are reality, and the reality is this: it is to address those folks that are coming through the 66 corridor to get to 95 corridor to go north, because we got to do something to mitigate that, to get them out of our neighborhoods. This is a lot of these accidents and speedings and traffics and deaths that we're having. And so we can solve that issue. The other piece is mitigating what we're doing internally. So we got to put more safety measures in for pedestrian safety. And that's going to be a big thing of mine always. And this conversation about the future of transit is key for me. It's critical for me. So I'm just going to stop there and simply say, thank you, Supervisor Boddye. Thank all of us that have been a part of this process. And I hope that we can really come to the table and have a real conversation about, next steps. And so this is just an important conversation. So really, thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Just want to echo that. Thank you to all of our panelists, Jennifer, Tim, Rick, Megan, and Rebecca for joining us tonight. I know it's a Tuesday night. I know we usually be sucking up some of your time during a board meeting, but instead we're sucking up some of your time tonight during the town hall. So that's not lost on us as well. And again, last Supervisor Angry said, kudos to our staff, both offices, Neabsco and Occoquan, for continuing to field these questions, organize these great town halls. As we can see with the engagement, people understand that we run a tight ship with these town halls, and it's so we can get as much information out as possible to you all. And to the point, as Supervisor Angry said, we want to hear from you. This is the future of our community, not just us as elected officials, not just the agency heads that also live in our community, but you, our constituents, which we were elected to serve. We want to make sure that our vision encompasses your vision. And that's why, as our folks at DRPT said, you have until tomorrow night, even at the wee hours of the night, to register your comments in order to make sure that they know that when they present their study to the General Assembly and to us as decision makers locally, that your vision is our vision and we move forward together, as Supervisor Angry said. And lastly, that 2040 comprehensive plan update, again, that's our roadmap, pun intended, for the future of our community in the next less than 20 years. So, we talk about Metro, we talk about BRT, we talk about traffic safety, as Supervisor Angry said, but all that comes from you all. Where are these people coming from? We know people come from Prince William County from all over the world. 1 in 4 people in Prince William County is an immigrant, not only from another state or this region, but from another country. We have folks that are military, as my colleague Supervisor Angry, retired military people, after they're done with their deployment, after they're done with a military career, they realize they love this community so much, they put down their roots, they stay here. We have people that come here for business when it comes to working with the federal government, from DOD or whatever agency it is. So these people are coming from literally all walks of life, and setting down roots in our community. So how can we accommodate that growth in a very holistic, smart way, so we're not dealing with these huge traffic problems 20 years from now? That's why we're having these conversations. That's why I want to engage all of you. And that's why your input is a key part of this, because our future is the brightest when we get all of you on board and we all have a conversation. That said, we're going to sign off, but as Supervisor Angry said, we will continue to answer your questions just like we did last time. His office, my office, we'll huddle together, figure out another coffee and chat, a luncheon and talk about transportation. We'll get as many of these questions answered in a less formal format, because again, we know that you all would not be asking these questions, engaging this dialogue, unless you cared as much as we do about this community. So we have to entrust ourselves and take it. Our duty is to answer your questions as much as we can. That said, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Looking forward to our next conversations, and please be safe. Have a good night.